Good morning and welcome to today's session. My name is John Kuta, and I'm the head of PLM and Value Engineering here at KETIV. We've been helping manufacturers like yourself with product lifecycle management processes throughout the lifecycle. Everything from sales, config and quoting, RFQ response, to engineering. All the development processes as well as new product introduction, PDM, and all the other simulation, verification, validation processes, as well as release to manufacturing. Configuration dot control, obviously the change management process, items, BOMs, and change management, as well as manufacturing, supplier qualification and collaboration, part qualification, and some of the critical quality processes like nonconformance and CAPA, as well as service, issue management, and RMA management. Now, today, I'm going to talk about three common use case challenges that many of our customers come to us for solutions. Now, a lot of the capabilities that are foundational to these solutions are actually part of the out-of-the-box Fusion Manage product. But some of the extensions that we offer allow us to solve these use cases in a more compelling way. So you can see we have three use cases here that we're going to talk about: BOM analysis and grading, ECO scheduling and reordering of ECO stacks, as well as how we handle form, fit, and function changes. So let's begin. BOM analysis and grading is something that a lot of customers come to us and say, gee, how do I roll up attributes of my bill of materials to understand some of the metrics that define not only the functionality, but also some of the supply chain characteristics? So the challenge that most companies face is that they have some design options that they want to compare or they want to contrast. Now, these two design options may have similar performance in terms of the actual product performance. But the question is, which one should we use? And a lot of times that comes down to cost, quality, and some of the other factors that you need to consider in actually grading that BOM for manufacturability, quality, and service. So our solution involves using some of the out-of-the-box capabilities in Fusion Manage to roll up child item attributes. Now, that can be anything from cost to component weight to lead times and supplier ratings. And then we can roll up based on either a sum, a minimum, a maximum. So any of the things that you might do in an Excel spreadsheet, you can actually do as a part of your bill of materials. So here you can see we have the sum of total component costs, so we get a cost figure for that. Now, what we might want to do is compare two BOMs to see which one is better based on the characteristics that we're rolling up. So this can be done with an out-of-the-box comparison, which compares two revisions, or we can run a report that compares two items in a similar fashion. The next thing you might want to do is set up a monitor so that if a change occurs, you get alerted to that change based on some predefined thresholds. Now, that can be a nominal threshold, like, $5 for cost of goods sold, or it can be a percent of the nominal value. So here you can see at some interval, it goes above the threshold and we issue an alert. Now, so what's the value of doing this? Well, obviously we can reduce product costs, minimize labor based on knowing what is involved in the bill of materials. There are other things that are kind of peripheral to that. If you have visibility to lead times and supply risk, let's say, you can minimize production line down situations, as well as things like, for example, shipping costs. That's dependent upon the weight. And if you minimize weight, That's typically seen as a good thing. So now let's move on. Now, effectivity changes and scheduling and stacking ECOs may not be part of your day-to-day activities, but when you need it, it can be extremely critical. So let's go into this. Now, basically, what happens when a supplier is delayed on, getting a new part? Um, Sometimes you have to adjust that cut-in date to be more accurate. So you don't have a line down situation waiting for that supplier that's delayed to be compliant with the change order. The next thing is when you have an urgent change that can't be done with a deviation, that needs to be cut in immediately when you have a pending change that hasn't become effective yet. So that's typically a challenge where, gee, what do we do? Do we wait? Well, we can't wait because it's a line down situation or uh, whatever urgent or emergency situation you may have. So let's talk about updating effectivity. Now, the easiest option when you want to do this is basically call your systems administrator. They actually have the permissions to actually just go in and do that. But, many times that's not available as an option. So a more controlled option is you can allow a role of the manager to make the change. And we do this through very, very simple extension to Fusion Manage, where you can modify the effectivity date without changing the actual approval status. The next option, which is a little bit more sophisticated, is where you actually empower the engineer to go do that themselves, in which case they would need to clone or copy that ECO and create a new pre-approved ECO with that new effectivity date. So essentially, you're taking the old ECO and recreating that with all of the status as is, and allowing the engineer to go in and then update that effectivity date. So what happens when you've got an urgent ECO and there's a pending ECO on that the item that needs to be changed? So in this case, we've got ECO number one was approved in some date, maybe a couple weeks ago. And it's at Rev A, and it's scheduled to be released sometime in the future that will take it to Rev B. So what happens if we need to insert an urgent ECO today? So essentially what we would need to do is just add that ECO. Let's make it approved and released today. But instead of going from Rev A to Rev B, it would have to go to Rev C. Why? Because Rev B has been actually taken from ECO number one. So what happens to the change that we already approved on ECO number one? Well, the way that we accommodate that is we clone ECO number one, or we copy it. It's a pre-approved ECO, and we schedule it as the scheduled release date. But instead of going to Rev B, the next revision in line would be Rev D. So this is the way that we would actually insert that ECO number two without affecting ECO number one. Now, we do this all the time for customers. We help them with training and with all sorts of different value-added activities that we provide. So if you have any questions about this type of situation, please, give us a call. We're here to help. So the last challenge that we have, well, before we do that, let's talk about the value of actually managing this. So obviously you don't want to have to manage a manual workaround. You want to make sure that the cut-in date is as accurate as possible, especially if it's not a use-up situation. So obviously we want to reduce scrap and rework if the cut-in date is inaccurate, and reduce errors. Now let's talk about form fit function changes. This is a challenge that a lot of our customers come to us and say, look, a lot of times revision changes aren't the right answer because we're actually making a change where the new updated version is not inventory bin compatible with the old version. So we can't really mix the two parts or the two assemblies in the same inventory location. So we actually need to have a different part number. And typically that's done with a dash version where it goes from, say, dash 001 to a dash 002 to reflect it's a different part number, but it has the same quote unquote base number. So it's sort of visibly identifiable as a new item in that family. So the challenge is that, as I mentioned before, a lot of times a change is form fit function and isn't been compatible, as opposed to a revision change, which could be for cost, quality, serviceability, but it's not the same type of change. So how do I trace that change history and keep track of the fact that the dash 002 came from 001, et cetera, et cetera? So the way we would do this typically is we would assign a reason code that is associated with a form fit function change to enforce that that sequence. So we'd want to copy design and then edit that item with the proposed changes. So in copy design, we would actually create the dash 002 and create those changes. Now, we want to be able to essentially track the version history complete, whether it's a rev change or a version change. And there's probably two ways, well, there are two ways that we can do this. One is to supersede the old item, where the dash 001 becomes essentially inactive, or we can branch. This is not typically the case, but some of our customers ask us to actually branch the old version to keep that one active, but create the new version as the update. So what's the value here? Obviously, we want to avoid having to manually separate inventory of the two items and potentially improve product quality. Eliminate the risk of using the old item instead of the new item if it's something that's done to improve the functionality of an assembly. So these are the three top challenges that our customers face. And if you face any of these, this is something we do every day. And so please don't hesitate to call us. We can help you either configure your system or add some simple extensions to allow you to get past these. Now, why would you call KETIV? Well, we have extensive PLM experience, extensive experience with specifically Fusion Manage from Autodesk. We do value-based deployments where we actually estimate the value of a roadmap that we will recommend to make sure that you're adding the most value in the most critical situations. We have proven cost-effective Fusion Manage extensions that we use to solve problems like these and others. Vast amount of industry experience. Again, we've been doing manufacturing for many, many years. And we have unparalleled customer support when you need it. We're there for you to help you through any kind of situation. So what are the next steps? What should we do now? Well, typically when we engage with customers, we really want to get to know their environment, their challenges, and what they're facing today. Every business is a little different in terms of how you perform your processes, the type of industry you're in, your products. Everything is a little bit different or a lot different, depending on how that may be. So we recommend going to us, and we have a practice called business process assessment, where we'll come in for either a day or perhaps even a couple of days and really get to know your business, get to know the challenges and where we can add the most value. So we'll understand what you want to accomplish. Let's say it's improve quote response or improve win rate, increase productivity, reduce time to market, whatever that desired outcome may be. And we will take a look at our solutions, what we offer end to end, as we showed before in the product life cycle. And we'll find the solutions that make the most sense for your environment. So we're only going to identify and offer or recommend the solutions that we believe are going to add the most value in the fastest amount of time. Not everything, but the ones that are most applicable. So it's a three-step process. It's actually pretty straightforward. We have that discovery stage where we talked about the 1 to 3 days where we go on site and meet your people, really understand your business. We'll take what we learn, go back, analyze it, understand what the best solutions are for your company, and then we'll present a summary of findings. We'll present a roadmap. We'll present basically a high-level overview of the solution. We'll demonstrate the solution. We will model some assumptions that we'll use to calculate an estimated ROI so that you can feel comfortable with the fact that it's a good investment for your company. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.